best way for me to go about introducing the panel is probably for me to just call on them and just give a brief intro as I call on them. I'll give the intro, and then I'm going to ask them some questions to start off, and then from then on, we're going to allow them to basically answer questions as they want to answer the questions and get involved in the dialogue. If one of you has a question, raise your hand. We've got about a half hour, and we've got a bunch of topics to fill, so I'll try to get one or two audience questions in if I can. Okay, so with that, Peter Bernstein, who's second to last, he is one of the most seasoned editorial people that we have on the TMC team. He's been an analyst for years and years. He knows telecom really, really well in technology. And he's really responsible for coining this term, age of acceleration. And I figured Peter would be a great guy to give us about 90 seconds on age of acceleration. Take it away.
So here's the good news. Thank you, Rich. Welcome, everybody. We're on the clock, so I'm watching because I tend to run long. The reason I came up with the term is I think we're in the maturation of the internet age. There are only two things that we absolutely positively know for sure. The first one is that the new normal is that change is the only constant that we can think of, and that it's all around us, it's pervasive. It affects us in our daily lives as well as our professional lives and our interactions with everybody in our ecosystems professionally as well as friends, family, and everybody else. And the second piece of that is that the speed at which things are changing is accelerating. And we haven't come up with a Moore's Law for this. Maybe we can make it the Tarani Law. But the reality is every year that you look at, if you just went through the cycles of product introductions and how they get to 1 billion people or a fast adoption, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And as Rich said, real time is now too slow in many respects because you need to be proactive as well as reactive. And the last thought, and I'll turn it back since my 90 seconds are almost up, and I told Rich this morning before we came in, this is the new idiot box, right? So if you remember the big fear about television when it happened was that we were going to spend our lives on it, watching it, and it turned out that was true and everybody became a couch potato. The real danger now is that we can talk back, right? And just think about this. Facebook, the average person on Facebook is spending 6 hours a month, and that's just Facebook. So anyway, back to you.
Great. Does anyone else have a comment on that? You know, Larry with Embrace, Larry is a consultant, a very well-respected consultant for startups and for carriers, and he probably has some unique thoughts on just this age of acceleration.
Well, I don't know how unique they are, Rich, but one, thank you for having me this morning. We do, indeed, we do growth strategies and provide growth tools to both entrepreneurs and service providers. And so it gives us maybe a unique perspective. We work with very early stage entrepreneurs who are, as you said just earlier, desperately trying to get to market very quickly, but more desperately than that, trying to figure out whether they're actually going to market with the right thing, which is harder and harder because in the age of acceleration, actually, what happens is we become far more fickle as business and business consumers and day-to-day consumers. And but then on the flip side, we also work with a variety of more mature service providers who are chasing a completely different problem, which is how to keep up and how to decide what to keep up with. And they turn into really more a bunch of fast followers, which used to be a negative term, but it's not so much anymore, because if you can fast follow successfully, you can do much better than those who got to market first, actually. So it's interesting to watch both those communities, in effect, try to do the same thing, but fight very different challenges.
Excellent. Carl Ford has virtually unlimited experience in developing communities in virtually every technology that's hot and emerging that I know of, from wireless to wireline to voice over IP to M2M. Carl, with your unique perspective on the market, give us your thoughts. 90 seconds. In
90 seconds or less, yes. So I want to comment on what Larry said, because I think back in the early Bond days, a lot of the guys used to say, I don't want to be a pioneer because pioneers get shot. You know, they get stuck being Indians, right? And you want to be the colonists. You want to be the second wave. And on the acceleration side, we need to talk about Cooper's law, right? Because the truth of the matter is that the throughput on your cellular devices and on wireless in general is just multiplying. And you know, down at Super Wi-Fi, we're talking about that. And then the more important side of this is the fact that it's now becoming a very oriented towards business, right? When you look at M2M and the battle of the platforms we had, the ROI we kept hearing about was just phenomenal. And we've got a lot of displacement and a lot of change going on very quickly, and a lot of opportunities showing up in various places, including, you know, how you develop applications, which is why we run DevCon 5 together. Because the fact that
A conference on HTML5, just
yeah,
to add.
and HTML5 is basically going to create this world where hybrid apps get developed. So while everybody's sitting there going Apple, 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 although they were until about a week and a half ago, now we're at a point where we're seeing, you know, hybrid solutions coming up, and it's making it so the development can kind of harmonize again. Because the thing we saw was that back when we started, it took you about $2 million to start a company. We're down to about $200,000 to start a company and to get the right staff involved and to do something. So to Larry's point, knowing what you want to do and how to do it is critical, because of the fact that there are so many low entries just disappeared, or the high entry disappeared.
Thank you. Phil is someone who's had top technology roles and marketing roles, sales roles in companies like Nortel and Avaya, where he's worked on carrier, he's worked on enterprise, and intimately knowledgeable about technology from a manufacturing standpoint, from a provider standpoint. And I was hoping, Phil, you could maybe touch on some of the topics that we just discussed, but start with one of the first topics I wanted to get into, which is ecosystems. And who's going to win the ecosystem war now that RIM seems to be re-emerging as an important player? I mean, what do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, so I think going back to the age of acceleration, to start there, I think we're in this very unique time, because if you think about what we're talking about in this week, in this year, are three technologies. And there are three core areas that are changing. The first is, and I'll make the argument that if you think about these, each one's driving change in the other in a rapid way. And it's the chicken and egg happening essentially in very rapid fashion. So devices, the rate of change in devices is very high. The rate of change in the wireless infrastructure, ubiquitous wireless, ubiquitous bandwidth, ubiquitous nomadic bandwidth, what you can get in your house, what you can get anywhere, anytime, is also changing very rapidly. And then the cloud think of it as a deployment model. The concept that the intelligence has moved back to the cloud. We're essentially moving back to, you know, I think almost the 3270 world. You think about your device is less of a computer and more of a very intelligent display. HTML5 drives that. We're going to talk a lot about WebRTC, I think, in a little while. WebRTC drives that as well. But what this means is the cost of deployment in the cloud to do something in the cloud, deliver a service, deliver a new function, is very low. And those three things together, if you think about that, it's actually an exponent. If each one is changing at a rate of change of 50% a year, the net rate of change is 1.5 times 1.5 times 1.5, so your change per year is about 4. So right now we're at this unique time where we have the three big things that drive technology are all in rapid change at exactly the same time. I think this is the real unique confluence that's happening in 2013, is the rapid rate of change in everything. And each one is driving the other. More bandwidth lets us deploy more stuff in the core. I don't need to have 10,000 songs on my iPhone. I can stream music. I can get new apps. So I think that's a profound transformation. And the technologies, HTML5 on the display side, WebRTC for communications, they're driving that, from how you link to the cloud with the devices across this new, incredibly increasing bandwidth wireless infrastructure. So that's why acceleration is happening at such a rapid rate. And I personally think it's going to really accelerate over the next year or two, because I don't see any reason that any one of those three is going to slow down in the next 2 to 3 years.
Thanks, Phil. Now, Eric Linask, who's sitting right next to Carl here, he is responsible for managing my entire editorial team at TMC. He manages, between contributors and editors, hundreds of people. He has, in his career, probably developed 500 conference sessions at events, if not more. He's probably sat in, I'd say, 3,000 or 4,000 briefings with companies in the industry, done many videos. So he's in a unique perspective to have absorbed infinite amounts of information from the industry, and now is your time to condense it all in 90 seconds and give it back to us.
Thanks, Rich. You know, Larry and Peter both mentioned the sort of crossover between our business and our personal lives. And a lot of the technologies that both Carl and Phil mentioned, really in addition to creating an age of acceleration where we just need to communicate and enabling that instant communication, they're making it convenient. I think there's an age of convenience or an era of convenience that runs parallel to Peter's age of acceleration. All the great technology that enables that real-time communication, WebRTC, HTML, 5, unified communications, mobility, BYOD, all those great trends are making it convenient for us to work wherever we are, whether we're on a plane, on a train, here at TExpo, at home on the weekends. It's got to be convenient for us to react in real time to our customers, our colleagues, our partners. And you know, so I think that's one of the big elements to this real-time age of acceleration is also making it convenient.
Excellent. So, Phil, we're going to go to you on WebRTC. Our companies have worked together, and we actually have a show called WebRTC Expo, and so I just wanted to make that disclosure. And we both saw this as a huge emerging trend in the market, and I was hoping if you could give us 60 seconds on why everyone in this room is going to be affected by WebRTC in ways they can't even conceive of yet.
Excellent. So how many of you know what WebRTC is? So those of you who didn't raise your hand, let me take you back. It's 1992, you saw your first browser. What did you think when you saw your first browser? Did you think with this I could invent the world's largest auction site and stolen goods fencing location? Because you'd be a billionaire today, because you would have invented eBay. Did you think that in 20 years there would be 1 billion people on something called Facebook, that there would be Google? Think about all the things that the web spawned, because what the web did, what the browser and the World Wide Web did, was it changed the way we interact with information. In 1991, all of us had a server. We were tied to a server, and if I wanted to interact with you, we had to have our servers interact. I had to ask my server to interact with your server. What happened was the CERN guys said, that's not the right answer. Let's create something where you can go directly to the server where the information is you want. And the world changed in big ways. So WebRTC at a technology level is very simple. It's putting a media engine into a browser. So you can go to a website. If two of us are on a website with 40 lines of JavaScript, that website can cause our two browsers to have a session with each other. And it can be more than browsers. There's some demos of things like how you do this in an automobile for music. But the point that's really important is we are going to a server and having a communication event initiated by that server without having separate servers. Every phone call you make today is you asking your server to talk to somebody else's server and arrange your communications. What WebRTC does to communications is the same exact thing that the browser and the web did to information 20 years ago. And think about how much the world changed in the 10 years after that, between 1992 and 2002. How you work changed, how you live changed, how applications were delivered changed. We're going to see that exact same thing happen the next 3 years in communications, where literally instead of you having a communications that's defined by one environment, in a day you may go to 10 different communication environments. So if you own a website, you need to think about how am I going to take advantage of this on my website? How am I going to integrate it in my business process? What am I going to do if I'm an enterprise with a telecom system? Is this going to be how I'm going to do BYOD? What does it mean for my contact center, my customer interaction? Do I put a portal up where this is how people interact with my employees without having to come through a trunk line? If you're a service provider, huge question. If you look at things like VoLTE and RCS, how do they integrate with this? How does it develop over-the-top carrier plays? So if you're not familiar with WebRTC and you want to be around communications, customer interaction, websites, any of those technologies, it's something you really need to learn about in 2013, because by the end of this year, there will be between 500 million and 1.5 billion natively enabled WebRTC devices in people's hands. And they're going to want to come to you and use this as a way to communicate with you. So, Rich, I think it's an incredible opportunity for those that get into it early and understand it.
Opening this up to the panel. Anyone else have thoughts?
I would just say that I agree with. First of all, I think you did an excellent job of simplifying WebRTC, and I'd like you to do that again later for me. But because I think it is like anything else, it's moving so quickly that people are getting misunderstood definitions of it, and it's becoming bigger than itself too quickly. So, well done. But I agree in the sense that certainly, you know, I can't say that we've talked to any service providers who are even know what it is yet. But I wouldn't expect so, given how many other things that they need to catch up with first. But in the entrepreneur community, it's already rampant, and what it's doing. It makes me think of some of you in the room, and certainly here on the panel know that many years ago, companies like Twilio and Voxeo Labs and others kind of opened up voice and SMS to the web developer community to come in and build things using communication technologies and start to communication-enable processes that weren't being done before. And I'm kind of seeing another surge, because that quieted after a little bit. We're seeing another surge where people who are not from our community, if you will, are coming in and using the WebRTC opportunity to, in many cases, actually video enable a process, a process distinct from one we would think connected to communications, and put a video layer into that they could have never done before WebRTC. And they're going to build fantastic businesses very quickly. So I really do think the window in the next 12 to 18 months is superb for that.
Carl.
That's a good pickup because of the fact that at the WebRTC World we had Mozilla and we had Google talking, and we're very aware with Bernard of what's going on in Microsoft with it, and Apple was kind of one of the people who suggested it. Of course, they then kind of held on to themselves like they normally do. But what's been fascinating to watch is, and we know Opera's doing it too, I should mention that, and what we see is the fact that this is not IETF. How many are old enough to remember that SIP was based on HTML? Raise your hands. Okay. And what we have to remember is that, you know, for years, if you went into the IETF and listened to the standards folks, they were sitting there going, man, I can't believe how heavy we've gotten. And, you know, we really need to get back to a much lighter thing. And what is going on right now is the W3C is going to be a huge driver in this. So while we think in terms of our normal way that telecom works, it's really the internet guys who are going to lead us in WebRTC.
I think the point there is it's not just the protocols, it's the APIs thing that make it easy. And come back to an interesting point. So there are two interesting applications. And by the way, those of you who are interested, I have a session today at 3:30. I'll kind of do a little bit of an intro, but there are two that were very interesting. One was shown at the AT&T. AT&T at CES does a hackathon where people show what they can do with the ATT infrastructure. And there was a company, Vobi, that did a product called Joyride, or a development called Joyride, which was where people can go to your Facebook page and go through that to your car page that tells them you're driving and what speed you're going and where you are, and then your friends can propose songs that you can listen to by a conference in your car as you drive along, and then talk to you about the music they proposed. So you kind of think about what that's bringing together. The other one that was really interesting is a guy who actually...
Where do airbags fit into that? Airbags fit into that technology?
It's a very interesting question about what your concentration is. I've had a lot of people tell me that the self-driving car is the key to video in the car.
Because I've been testing Waze, and for those of you, it's this mobile, social, death-defying GPS for your smartphone. Everyone should try it. Anyway, continue, please.
But there's another one that's interesting. In one of the discussions that we run on WebRTC, there was a gentleman came in and said he runs a online music training and tutoring business. And he said, you know, WebRTC is ideal for that. And stop and think about that. Coming back to the video enablement, that's a way that you can use this technology to change and virtualize a business. And again, coming back to that thought process, 1992, how many of you used to use classified ads in 1992? How many of you actually have used a classified ad in the last year, right? The web killed classified ads. You're going to see exactly the same thing with this new technology and changing the way we think about businesses, the virtualization of businesses. And for each of you, understanding how that can impact your business is going to be absolutely critical.
So that's really interesting that, and Peter, we'll get to you in 1 second.
Yeah.
So Phil, you're basically saying that traditional methods, so the way we all communicate now is through carriers, and so basically you're saying that in that amount of time from 92 to 2013, we don't use classifieds. You're saying in that time or less, we're not going to be using traditional carriers, and Larry is saying that the carriers aren't aware of WebRTC, which is kind of an interesting situation. So I hope this carrier is here in the audience listening and paying attention, or someone's emailing them and letting them know that there's some big changes coming down the pike. And I'm going to give it to Peter right now, who's got some thoughts.
So this has been really good because we've talked about technology, but this is a business conference as well, right? And we need to bring it back to a higher level, and I'm going to throw out 2 really quick thoughts, and I'm going to urge you to come back to the panel that I'm going to run at 10 o'clock on the future of the service providers. The first one is the single most profound change that happened as a result of the internet was the change between the relationship and the buyers and sellers of things, right? For 150 years or more, it was, I'm the seller, here's my offer, take it or leave it, right? The internet gave the buyer more perfect information and choice, right? So who is the king? It isn't content, it's the customer, right? That's a change. That change is increasing, right? That's part of the age of acceleration. More perfect information. The flip side of that is marketers are getting more perfect information about us, and that brings up privacy questions, right? So that's number one. The second one is show of hands, and I'm going to do this later. How many of you believe that we are because of this convergence that we just talked about, that we are at a tipping point in the history of the industry, and that whatever happens in the next 12 to 18 months is going to profoundly affect who's still around and who is successful 5 years from now? Right? Why? Right here. So, just food for thought.
So we're going to shift gears into BYOD. It's an unbelievable change in the last, I'd say it started in '95, before there were even devices people were bringing into the office. I noticed a change where, for the first time, consumers were using browsers at home and forcing management and their IT departments to deploy browsers in the office. So in 1995 was an unbelievable shift in the way technology was deployed in organizations. And over the years, what we've seen is that more and more foreign devices, and I say foreign devices because they're usually devices that are unsanctioned by IT departments and by management, are finding their way into organizations. This can cause a lot of security issues, training issues, management issues. Eric, do you want to kick off? We haven't heard from you in a few moments.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Rich. BYOD's been interesting, and if you've had a chance to sit in on a few of the many BYOD-focused or mobility-focused sessions, you'll have gotten an understanding of what some of the challenges are. But again, coming back around, Rich, to the idea of convenience in the age of acceleration, BYOD really is making it more convenient for employees to interact with their personal and their business lives in a fashion that they're used to, that they've become accustomed to. Obviously, it presents some challenges for enterprise IT departments. The great thing about that is that cloud and other offerings are making it a little bit easier for those IT managers to deal with the BYOD environment. Also,
because they just have browser-based access,
right?
Or there are apps for all these devices.
But in line with some of the stuff that Phil was talking about, WebRTC works well in the BYOD environment because, again, it makes it very convenient to be able to communicate with whether it's your colleagues or your customers. To Peter's point, customer is king on the device of their choosing. So while it's a trend, it's not a trend that's going away. It's a trend that's going to be critical to the continued relationship between the buyer and the seller.
Phil?
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize, interesting thought process. Turn your personal device off, your smartphone, and see how many of the apps work and have value. What you begin to realize is that almost all the apps that have value when you're connected to a network. And again, wireless is becoming such, when are you not connected with reasonable bandwidth? That time is getting smaller and smaller, the time domain of non-connectivity. And most of the apps that you use are not applications. We call them applications, but they're not. They're really just presentation interfaces. You go to American Airlines and you look at reservations, you're not looking at an application, you're looking at a presentation interface. What this DevCon 5 HTML is all about, how does an app just become that interface? And once an app is just an interface as an IT manager, when you turn off the app, everything goes away. So the security, you're not putting data on the device, you're displaying data on the device. You obviously have to trust the person that's seeing the data, but that's really becomes a much more secure implementation because the data is staying in your facility, in the cloud, in a secure location. All that's being presented is the information required at that point in time for the user to do the work they need to do. So it feels like an application, but it's not bringing data down and storing it and using it locally. So that's a real profound change that's happening.
Thanks, Phil. Larry, 30 seconds on the topic?
I just wanted to quickly add, on this BYO application instead of D, I was thinking of bring your own wine. But is that you mentioned the shift in '95 and the shift now. The shift that's come along with that we don't always talk about is from a sales perspective. We're also not selling to the IT department first very often. In fact, when I say bring your own application, many younger companies target specific departments in an enterprise or medium-sized business, the marketing department, the sales manager, other, start with an application that maybe 2-3 people use and allow that to go viral and then move upstream to the IT department, at which point the IT department is not left with a lot of choice if it's really engaged as a business process with a certain department. So I think it goes for both devices, but very much so for applications as well.
Thanks. Now, I wanted to move on to the next topic because we have about 1 minute remaining. Someone want to take M2M and discuss the Amazon rainforest example.
The Amazon rainforest example?
If you're not familiar with that, I am, so go ahead.
I am, except I can't remember who it was that showed it to us.
It's more important to discuss the concept.
So basically,
Let's start off saying what the M2M is and describing it.
Okay. It's machine to machine. It's not mat to mat, as the internal crowd has said. And what we've been doing is,
and it's an interconnection of basically all things. Yeah, almost everything will be interconnected.
Yeah, the Internet of Things discussion was interesting. Robin Duke-Woolley was suggesting that Internet of Things is the stuff that's really kind of consumer-oriented, and M2M was the business-to-business applications. I'm not sure I buy that. I see Internet of Things as being all-inclusive of all sensors, no matter how they're connected. And I think M2M is going to be pretty much the same. I think they're synonymous. So anyway, back to the subject at hand in 9 seconds. In the Amazon rainforest, what they did was they sampled cut trees with M2M sensors and discovered who it was that was basically stealing and pirating and cleansing the rainforest.
So they put the sensors in the trees, and then when somebody, and the Amazon rainforest is about the size of the United States, so they can't monitor all of it. So they put these sensors in the trees, and when these sensors got within 30 miles of a cell tower, an alert went off in the police station telling them where the trees were, and they were able to track the trees down in real time and basically catch the guys, or the people, I should say, who cut down the trees and prosecute them.
Can I just point out one thing? That the thing that's going on here, in Startup Camp today, John Scully's going to talk, and John's a real big guy on communities of interest. And what's going on in M2M and WebRTC and in all our stuff is that everything is turning into a Skype-like or Facebook-like environment where it's all going to be figure out who your community is. It's, as our pals at IBM say, pub sub. And that's the whole idea. It's publication of get the sites up and then get the subscribers associated with you.
So guys, we have negative 1 minute left. I want each of you to give me 15 seconds, starting with Larry. Larry, if people want to see you again today, where do they see you throughout the day?
I thought it was going to be a much harder question. We are hosting our 7th startup camp this evening. It starts at 4 o'clock with a cocktail. As you said, John Scully, we're super excited. We feel very honored that he will be joining us to talk tonight. Former CEO of Apple and of Pepsi, and 4 great early stage startups who can use everybody's support and feedback. tonight, starting at 4 o'clock.
And
in
he's,
this room.
for those of you that don't know, he's the man responsible for Steve Jobs' firing. So the only person responsible for Steve Jobs' firing ever.
And
So
Steve Jobs is responsible for John's firing.
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's funny how things work
What
out
goes
that way.
around comes around, you know.
Peter, 15 seconds.
Pitch for my panel in a half an hour because I think the future of the service providers is something that should be top of mind for everybody because it's about who owns the customer. Last thought is
Half
two
hour
words.
in this room.
Right, in this room. 2 words: context mediation, and it's not just convenience; it's responsiveness.
Phil?
3:30, we're going to be doing a session, Introduction to WebRTC. For those of you who want to get more information, good opportunity and find out about some of the things that are going on in that space.
Eric?
Always follow me on Twitter at ElanAsk or catch me at 12:30. All of our conference sessions start at 12:30. Grab your lunches, go into the conference sessions. I'll be in the customer interaction track.
Eric, I'm sorry, Carl.
I'm going to be here most of the time to listen to the general sessions, and I'm going to go down to M2M, but I have a small cell session in TExpo that I'm going to be running. So by and large, I'll be by M2M and Super Wi-Fi downstairs, right below here.
Thanks, guys. Please give him a hand.